Morning, everyone. Good morning. Morning. We don't have enough energy in here. Hey, boss, Startup Boston, what's up? We thank you. So glad that everyone's here. It's been awesome. I've been particularly impressed with everything that's been going on. But we have one mission here. That's to bring the entire startup community together, every department, funding stage, and industry. And Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted, unbiased guide to the best resources wherever you are. And so hopefully we've been able to deliver that to you here. And I'm sure this next panel discussion is going to be great. Before I dive in, wanted to give a huge thanks to people that make this happen, particularly Suffolk University for just graciously donating their space to us to be able to make this happen. That is honestly huge. If you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, they offer a variety of programs and opportunities. So be sure they have a table here at the fourth floor. So be sure to check them out if you're interested in anything like that, or interested in maybe seeing how you can help out some of their students that are going through their courses as well here. So my name is Jacob. I literally just moved here 3 weeks ago, and I'm starting my own startup, and no pun intended, right? And I was curious, like, how am I gonna figure out what to do next? And honestly, this popped up as soon as I searched it in Google, and it was great. And so I'll invite the panelists to come up here and take their seats here on the stage. But while they do that, more importantly, I'm about to be a dad here in the next 3 weeks. So what better way to start off with than with a startup dad joke? I gotta get. So why did the startup founder bring a ladder to work? Because he realized that his valuation is only going up. All right, there we go.
Well, how do I beat that joke, right? You set the bar pretty high, Jacob. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to Startup Boston Week. How are we feeling? Excited? I think we should be very excited. We have great people on this panel. So yeah, I'm Disliv Kanku. I'm co-founder and CTO for Echo Labs, who are an AI music curation platform here in the Boston area. And welcome to our panel. So, our panels basically, we want to have a discussion about what it takes to build a team, because that's very important. It saves you a lot of stress, a lot of trouble, and we have a great list of panelists, and I'm excited to moderate this session. So can we just give them a round of applause first? Before I give them a chance to introduce themselves, that was too loud. Is this better? Before I give them a chance to introduce themselves, let's just do a temperature check on how everyone, so in terms of team structures, how many of us are in a team of, let's say, 5 or fewer than 5? Okay, so smaller teams. So 6 to 20? Okay. Anything bigger than 20? Wow, unicorn. Nice. That's a startup joke. Okay, so yeah, I think we're ready to have our panelists introduce themselves. You want to start, Pascal?
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pascal Kriesche, co-founder and CEO of Smoothie. And so Smoothie, if you haven't heard about it, it's a food tech startup in the robotic space, born out of Boston. Actually started it about 7 years ago with the mission to empower healthy habits. So if you wonder about my accent, I'm originally from Germany. When I first came to the US, I definitely gained some weight, and I think the convenient choice is always the unhealthy one, unfortunately, but it doesn't have to be like that. And being a mechanical engineer from background, I think I was naive enough to think I could build a device that actually takes care of all the hassle when you get your fresh and healthy beverage. So now what came out is actually a smoothie robot. You can think about it like a Keurig or an espresso, but for smoothies. A fully self-serve, self-cleaning machine that is deployed in corporate offices, hospitals, universities, amusement parks across the country, and very soon in airports. So I'm excited about this. Charlotte Airport is going to take off in November. And along the way, I think some of the key things we had to build was, the team, and I think that's focused today, but also our co-packer, our frozen distribution, so being available nationwide, figuring out the manufacturing, and a lot of challenges along the way, a lot of slaps in the face, but I'm still excited and energized every morning with or without the smoothie, so excited to be here, and happy also to connect afterwards and share my lessons learned.
Yeah. Kate?
Afternoon. Good morning, all. Kate Brummie, CEO of Mass Challenge. Mass Challenge, we're a global nonprofit headquartered in Boston. Our passion, our mission is to work with the rare humans, the founders who take on the hardest problems, like Pascal. We focus today in 5 big sectors: healthcare and life science, financial services and fintech, climate, sustainable food systems, and security and resiliency. And we run a network of non-equity accelerator programs that really help founders connect to the markets, the customers, and the other key networks they need to thrive. Mass Challenge was a startup 15 years ago here, so we have our own story of getting from 1 or 2 crazy founders to over 50 today with international offices, and then we have the huge privilege of working with about 300 startups a year from pre-seed to typically no later than Series A, and helping them at critical points in their journey. So really excited to be here. Nothing is more important and nothing is harder than the people side of our work.
And we were part of the program like 6 years ago, so I can highly recommend a great resource, great team, great community. I think when you start, it's very important to be surrounded by other founders, and you definitely get that at Mass Challenge.
Hi everyone, my name is Bridget Snow. I am the founder and president of an organization called Fractionals for Impact. I'm here for myself because I have a new venture, but what's my qualifier for being on the panel? My qualifier for being on the panel is I've been working, I think my first startup was in the early 2000s. It's an international organization, it still exists, that's the good news. It works all over the world in terms of helping all types of organizations produce sustainability reporting, so to know what their environmental, social, and economic impact is in the world. So that was my first startup. But then my last 20 years, I've been working in international development, and everyone in the room knows what's happening in international development. So I was working for 2 of the most premier international development organizations in the world, Oxfam and Save the Children. And what I did in those organizations was, number 1, I was working with purpose-driven organizations, determining how to deliver the impact that they said they were going to produce, so very much a leadership question. And then 2, I was working around the world trying to build out a leadership model for social justice, impact, and nonprofit organizations. And so that's what I hope to bring here today. But more importantly, Fractionals for Impact is actually trying to rethink what is the nonprofit leadership model of the future, where resources are getting constrained, there are fewer people, but the impact that we're trying to achieve has not diminished. So we need to rethink leadership, and so therefore I wanted to share some thoughts about that with you all as founders. I think there will be more nonprofit founders coming out around the world, and we want to be here to help them.
Good. James?
I'm Joyce Pieri. I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in Detroit. First person in my family to go to college. Another first industrial designer to go to Harvard Business School. And that decision kind of set the course for my life in that I became a person who can see the white space, but also can lead people to attack the white space. And I love that combination. So I did that in 3 startups. One of them, all of them had exits. One of them was extremely modest. It was a company called Ziggs you've never heard of because it competed with LinkedIn. And I learned a lot about what it means to be that sort of second-run company. The other 2, one of them is still thriving, called Continuum, which is an innovation consultancy. And the company I'm probably most known for is the company I co-founded called the Grommet. It's a company that launched one innovative consumer product a day, products now that are old to me, but products like Bombas socks and Simply Safe and SodaStream and Solo stoves and Fitbit, Oven pizza ovens. Bananagrams, thank you. Exactly, like one a day. We looked at 300 a week to launch 5, and it seems crazy now, but I didn't know we were doing it at the time, but we were the first company to introduce video storytelling in e-commerce. Crazy, just crazy. And so we were pioneers in a lot of ways, and I have arrows in my back, partly because of being a pioneer for sure. I've since moved on in the last 5 years. I got fired, actually, so there's a whole story there that we probably don't have time to get into, but I'm not afraid to talk about it. And I sold the company, and that ended up with my demise. But now I have a portfolio career, which is different things. Basically, I'm a partner in X Factor Ventures. We invest in early-stage companies with diverse founding teams. And I'm an adjunct professor at Boston University, teaching a new course on consumer products entrepreneurship, and I'm an executive fellow at Harvard Business School. And then I do these things that nobody knows about, but I really care about, which are impacts in my community. And I'm mentioning it here today because you guys have startup energy and talents, and the kind of things it takes to attack that white space and really think something could be better are so well applied in communities. So if you go to Charlestown in the Navy Yard, I just helped implement a massive public art set of sculptures, installation called Bridge of Joy. And that sounds kind of simple, activating public space, but it's actually doing a whole lot to knit our community together in ways I won't get into. So I don't see it as just art. And there's so many problems and so many opportunities that whether you can do it now, and you probably can't if you're in a startup. I couldn't do the kind of things I'm doing now. But just think of it for later, that the skills you're getting now can actually transcend and solve problems that are way bigger than the ones you're working on now in many cases.
Thank you. Wow, what a great panel, right? Doesn't this just feel like Christmas, Christmas morning, just presents? But thank you guys for being here, and I can, if I don't mind speaking for everyone, we appreciate you guys giving us some knowledge. So yeah, let's get it started. Okay, so we have a list of questions. So the first question, what are the biggest hiring mistakes you see startups make when scaling up the seed or Series A? Jules, do you mind starting this one off?
This might not be a mistake, but it's definitely a pattern, which is when you start a startup, you start with generalists, those kind of athletes that can do anything and say yes to any new thing. And they're essential. They are the core lifeblood of that sub 5, sub 15, sub maybe 50 even company. But sometimes startups take a little while, or at least CEOs take a little while to realize the importance of specialists, the people who come in and they've been there, done that. And a really successful scale up is going to have still the generalists, because you're still going to do new things. You need those really kind of say yes people who will try new things. But those specialists, I'll never forget when we hired our first specialist, what a sigh of relief it was. So I would think about that at that stage. The other thing I think about is an opportunity. It's not necessarily a mistake, but a lot of startups, they get born, co-founders get born out of some shared context. If you're a founder, you probably founded a company with somebody you worked with before, you went to school with, and
that kind of shared context can lead to trust and speed. So when you look at a lot of startup founding teams, they're pretty homogenous. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it's bad to stay there. And you have to start caring. Well, let me start with my bias. When my oldest son was hiring into a startup that had a completely homogenous team, I said to him, I was waiting to hear if he would notice that or say something about it. And he didn't. And I pointed out, and he said, oh, yeah, Mom, I've thought all about that. It's a risk factor. And that's my point, that if a team stays homogenous, it's taking on undue risk because it's not embracing other perspectives. And so my company, we were a bunch of, let's say, 10 of us. The first 10 of us were middle-aged white women. I needed women or people who are really experienced, can move really fast. It was an okay choice for where we were at, but we couldn't stay there. And we had to get younger people. We had to get more men. We had to diversify racially, all kinds of things that we did not have in our team. And some things are easy, but you have to start right away. You cannot wait until you're 50. It's too late if you're already 50 people, I believe. So things that are easy, getting younger employees is super easy. In this city, I mean, I don't need to tell you how to do that. We're sitting at one of the great places to do that. Getting men, obviously, shouldn't be too hard. Women have diverse gender networks. Men sometimes don't. So men sometimes struggle on the other side, but it's not hard for women usually. Diversifying racially was really hard for us, and I had to make a consistent commitment that never ended, that I would show up in spaces to build my own personal network with people I didn't know, naturally didn't run into easily, or not in my already existing networks. So I would just personally go on panels, whatever. I was just telling Bridget that I was on a panel with our rep, Ayanna Presley, before she was famous on this topic, diversity in startups. And so I never stopped caring about that all along. Another third one, maybe not a mistake, but just a CEO bias that I had was, it's just kind of quirky, I think, but we started the company in Lexington, Massachusetts, really inconvenient for young employees, like bus, train type transport to Lexington. We were in 3 buildings that were a walk away from each other, very janky, no conference rooms. We met on a dumpster. I'm really not kidding. We met on a dumpster in the warm weather because we could kind of gather around it. And when I recruited new employees, I always knew they were there for the mission. There were absolutely no perks in sight. And it gave me a lot of confidence about somebody who was interested in working for the company, that they were there for the right reasons. And we scaled up and got beautiful office space. It was purpose-built for us in a classic bricks and beam building. I'll never forget the first person I interviewed, because we were in this really nice space, and I was insecure about her maybe being there for the wrong reasons. I mean, it was ridiculously insecure. I ended up hiring her. She told me I was really hard on her, and she was fantastic. She was there for all the right reasons. So sometimes CEOs kind of hang on to something. In my case, I was hanging on to this, like, you gotta want it. You gotta be in a broken chair and meet on a dumpster, and it's not that simple.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I'll just add that I think maybe to build on some of the paradox, the sort of balance you have to make as you go from very early stages when you can't afford to hire anyone to having some capital to hire. I think one of the important watchouts is not to hire too early. I think we'll get into it a little bit later, but balancing the what do I need in the future versus what do I need now, and the cost to organize and manage and coordinate people before you really know exactly how to deploy them can weigh heavy on the founder, even though I think there can be a real temptation to build the team and try and go, but there's a real cost to that also.
I think you mentioned a great point. So I think that actually leads to my next question for you, Kate. Given your experience with Mass Challenge and Mass Challenge having a background and being in this ecosystem, in the startup Boston ecosystem, how do you balance hiring for today's needs versus building for the company you're becoming or growing into?
I think this is a really hard problem that doesn't go away. It's something that I even think about today and in our role. Maybe a couple things that I'll say and then open it up to my panelists. One is that it is worthwhile for you as a founder to carve out some of your precious time to be thinking about where might I go, and that includes learning from others who are farther along. How does their team take shape over time? What are the decisions that they'll make about specialization or organization that you may want to have in mind? And I think that helps then when you have to zoom back to today and you've got budget for one hire to be more thoughtful about, is this person on my long-term roadmap? And therefore, I need to think about how they will grow with me, how perhaps they move from generalists to specialists or sort of grow in their skill set. It might help you think about some of the really hard trade-offs I think startups face around, high skill, big company versus the get shit done type of person, young versus old, here versus remote, sort of all of those tensions. And then there are times where it may be most prudent to just hire for today. You have a very specific job that you need to get done over 12 months, and it's the most critical function. And so balancing that sort of long-term thinking versus the urgency. As you balance long-term and short-term, I started to tease out, I think, some of the trade-offs that you'll think about, in your earliest stage and even as you go, which is the level, of seniority that you need. Do I want to bring in a CFO now, or am I really okay with a senior director of finance? You'll think a lot about sort of the cost trade-offs. Do I want to reach to make a big investment? My board and I have spent a lot of time. We need a head of sales. It's got to be excellent. Or is it a time it's not the right use of resources to put against a more expensive hire? And then I think that the nature of someone's background and experience is the other area that you can feel that long-term versus short-term trade-off as you go around building your team. I think our bias, even as Mass Challenge, we're sort of a small business, we're entrepreneurial in nature, is there's a temptation to reach big for big names, big labels, big roles, big titles. But most of the time in small businesses, particularly if everyone here is still under 20 people, you need people that are relentless up and down what I think of as the work stack. Like they will do and they will design and everything in between. They can sit at your board level. They can meet with your customers. They can, be in Excel late at night. And those are pretty rare humans that actually love being sort of in all parts of the work, regardless of what their background is. So I think that it's whether you're planning for the long term or the short term, if you're in the early stage of your startup, my recommendation would be you always sort of bias for those real doers.
Great point. So basically, you need someone that wears many hats.
Wears many hats until you need them to wear one.
Good. The panel's open.
I'm only going to add one thing, which is that I was listening to some other panelists today, and I think we don't talk enough about partnership at the onset. And so maybe that's a bit the perspective that we're trying. I mean, I have my own startup, and I'm defaulting to partnership. I'm defaulting to a non-competitive and a more collaborative model. Why? Because I think a gentleman this morning who has a biotech company said this. At the end of the day, we come together on the purpose and the mission. We're trying to change something in the world for the better. So actually our mindset has been very collaborative. So I found it to be really interesting coming in as we're a for-profit. I did not start up a nonprofit, interestingly, but the model is sharing collaborative to start. Not, and I'm finding that looking for those that complement what we do and they've already evolved something, to partner with them to bring that in as something shared that we can build together, is really motivating to me, as opposed to thinking that we're going to be the only ones who are going to do that. I think the need is so great in some areas, we need to collaborate more and bring that expertise in by finding those partners. And then I attended the legal session earlier today, and I still think those require contracts, and they still require agreements, and they still require shared values. So these are things we can still learn in the founder community and bring into those collaborations.
Great. That's a great point. And you mentioned model, and you definitely have been around the world. You've done a lot of great talks about leadership model. So the next question is there a specific mental model which you use to prioritize hiring when things feel urgent?
Well, I do like to say I worked with two very big humanitarian organizations. So I love this question because I think this is really, well, there isn't a single mental model. What I will say is that I do think that we all, as leaders, are struggling with how to make decisions when we are starting something and everything feels important. In a humanitarian organization, of course, everything feels important, but we do know what we're trying to achieve. So I want to start saying the first mental model, and I'll put these up on Slack afterwards. There's a Slack channel for the conference, and I'll make some of these available. But I think for leadership teams, the first move is to understand your priorities. Most organizations, I know everyone said they come from small organizations, but probably everybody has some area where you're dividing and conquering. You're trying to move something in your space, whether it's marketing, whether it's product, right? Whether it's finance. And every organization, even if it's small, all the way to big, the default mode for leaders tends to be, my thing is the most important. That's the default mode. What I am being asked by maybe it's the founder, right? Or I need to deliver on this. And therefore, the thing I'm doing is the most important thing to be done. So I start with the first mental framework or the model that I use with leadership teams is a prioritization framework. Getting leaders across different dimensions of where they're focused to look collectively and say, yes, I want to achieve my goal, but actually what's achieving the goal of the organization? What's the most important thing at this moment? And I think as leaders, we should be using those frameworks, maybe not in the way I use them in big organizations where I literally had them fill it out and quantify what's the most important thing and then have a conversation, but you can do it pretty easily. Number one is what we're trying to do strategically aligned. Number two is what we're doing improving the fundamental process of delivering our product. Right? Number three, are we improving the technology architecture that underpins our delivery? Number four, are we reducing risk? Is this decision is what we're focused on? And the reason we do that prioritization is you cannot do everything. You need to do a few things really well that are aligned to where you're going and the impact you're trying to achieve. And so when you do that as a leadership team or as a leader with your team, if it's small, it's still making your thinking transparent about why this is the most important thing we're going to do. Now, how does this have to do with hiring? Well, hiring is all around aligning your resources to deliver that, right? So that's what hiring is. It's aligning your people strategy, right? Just like you would with your financial strategy and your technology choices, you're aligning that to what you're trying to achieve. So let me just say, the first model, I actually have stolen a lot from Gartner. Don't tell Gartner. But it basically is already out there. That's why I'm going to share it with you. It's Gartner. It's in the public good, how to prioritize. But the second one I want to say, I've learned from technology. So I like to say I became a technologist in 2014. It was when I became a chief learning officer, and I had to reach 8 to 10,000 employees in 72 countries and so many languages. I was a people-first leader who very quickly became a digital-first leader because you cannot reach those people if you are not starting to take a digital-first approach. So I've become more and more, I've definitely, my background is feminist leadership models and social impact leadership models, but wow, I was fascinated when I became a technologist and realized there's technology leadership models. And those technology leadership models are bringing us a lot to the challenge that we're facing around making hiring choices. So I was going to offer to you, I've been thinking a lot about Wardley mapping. I don't know if anybody, yeah, right? And Wardley mapping is a way to make decisions about business strategy, especially around your technological choices. But I do believe Wardley mapping is really useful in terms of thinking about your human resources, the people that you're bringing. So to distill it a little bit simply, you're looking at your business context or your organizational context, and you're identifying what is it that you uniquely are contributing to the world? What are you creating? Smoothie, right? What are you creating that nobody else is creating? That's your thing. That's what you're generating, and then over time you're maturing it. Those are things you need to have in-house. in terms of the expertise. Now, sometimes you can't afford to have those expertise in-house, and that's why we have fractional leaders coming in, sometimes to help you generate. Fractional leaders are embedded in your team. They're not consultants. They're not extracting. They're not outside. They're part of you. You need to own that resource, I believe. And so Wardley mapping guides us in that. But then as you mature and you start to look at things that already are out there, that are, already a fairly mature model of how you do something, you start to productize it. It's something that you're not building on your own. It's something that already you're not even customizing. You're bringing it in and just configuring it to what you do. So those are situations where you may rent. You have, again, I'm going back to partnership. You partner with others to become part of your team to deliver that to a next level of maturity. And then finally, I love Wardley mapping to talk about commoditization. Why are we doing things that we don't need to do? It takes us away from our mission. And so it really gets us to think about what are the things that actually we just should be paying somebody else to do. It's a mature process, it's a mature product, and let's actually outsource that. And outsource sometimes is a bad word, but you can outsource locally. Right? It can be right here where you're saying this group can do this better. They've been doing it for years. Let's just negotiate a cost for how they're going to do that for us. So it makes you really rethink my team, unique value add. Things like, I don't know what my example is, benefits processing, sorry. Maybe somebody else should be doing that. That's not what we do, and somebody can do that better at lower cost. So Wardley mapping, really interesting. Don't think we're talking about it enough in HR and people practice. And then finally, I'm just going to say the third model that you all need to be thinking about is, at the end of the day, hiring and all of this priorities is about choice making. And so I really like to recommend that all leaders start focusing in your teams making explicit decisions and use a decision-making framework. Because at the end of the day, when you haven't made a clear decision, this is the priority, this is who we're hiring, this is how we're aligning money, and you document that decision and you're explicit about how that decision gets made, that's when we get that chaotic, confused moment and nobody moves. And we can't afford that in startups. We need everybody aligned and executing. So decision-making frameworks would be the third thing I offer, and I will put it on Slack so that you can use it tomorrow. And it says, what's the decision? How are we making the decision? And how are we documenting it?
Great point. I love how you mentioned partnership, and especially building a startup, you need to partner up with the co-founder. And in an ecosystem such as Boston, almost everyone is building a startup. You could literally go to the coffee shop, someone is working on a startup. And I think that's great. I think that's amazing. And my next question is actually for Pascal. How can early stage startups compete for tech talents in a place like Boston, where the big players are kind of influencing it?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that is working for me or has been working in the past is, I think, being very clear of what we can offer and what we cannot offer. So if I'm talking to a potential candidate, a new hire, and if they're very focused on the cash compensation, it's probably not a good fit. I mean, we have been historically cash constrained, resource constrained. So I think I lead much more with the mission, what we're trying to accomplish. I think we have a very noble mission of like providing fresh and healthy options for anyone, anywhere, and actually getting people who are aligned on the mission. Those will be the people that stick with you in the tough days. The one who's just chasing cash is probably going to leave after 18 months anyways because they get another offer. So if I get a sense of someone actually being focused on compensation, I recommend to go with Meta or Google, but don't come with us. I tell them upfront, we're not known to pay well. We will underpay. We will get to the point together where we can align market salaries, but we're not there today. So we need people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and actually work on something that will have a real impact. And you see the fire in people when they get it. And if they don't get it or don't want that mission, then anyways, you don't want them on your team. So I have found that model to work for me. There are some other things that I think we can offer. One, a lot of responsibility. I think there's no job in a corporate world where you wear so many hats, especially at the beginning. I think meeting the team, right? Your small, nimble team, meeting everyone, seeing that you get along well. We're super diverse as a team. I think there are a lot of things we we have and that we can actually be like very mindful of as a small team that a big corporate won't do. Like we're agile. Another one, I'm international. I know how difficult it is to navigate a visa process in the US. I know when you apply, they ask you, do you have a valid visa to work? If you check no, you're out of the process. I mean, most likely. I don't know what happens behind the scene, but I'm pretty sure that's happening. We have a history of actually sponsoring visas. We did every kind of visa from J1, H1B, O, finding green cards. It's a long process. We had one hire that took us 15 months to get him on board, but he's today our COO. And sometimes it's worth waiting on the right person. And I think when you do something like this, like sponsoring a visa that not even the big corporates do, that creates loyalty, and people are willing to go up above and beyond. And that's something that like cash compensation will never solve for. So I think when I look at our team today, we have talent that has been with us for a very long time, 5 years, 3.5 years. We don't have a lot of turnover. It's really if it's not a good fit that this happens. But I do think as a startup, you have so much to offer, and I don't think it's hard to compete. I think it actually forces you to find the right people. The last thing I will say on that is for us, we have a hardware product, food, frozen supply chain. So it's a tough business. When we interview someone from an intern to a regional manager or a COO, we bring them into our shop and we have them like service a machine. They get their hands dirty. It doesn't matter if it's a like senior hire, because I do believe, yes, you need specialists at some points, but you do need people who get their hands dirty. And what better way to test that by exposing them to our machine, giving them a challenge. It's not about them solving it. It's about seeing their excitement. Are they excited to take a screwdriver and open the machine? If they're not, it's just not a good fit. There's another job out there for them. But we have done that from the beginning, and we had real issues they had to solve. And then you see an interview of 30 minutes can turn into 3 hours, and you know afterwards I hired this person or not. So that's kind of the way we like to engage with people, and I think just see if there is a good fit. And that gives you an opportunity to really pitch the mission, what it's all about, get them excited about something that's far beyond the cash compensation.
Great. Does anyone have anything else to add to that?
Scott, I think it's so well said. Folks are so hungry today for a sense of purpose and community, and startups can uniquely provide that. So I think there are many trade-offs around salary and formal training and formal onboarding and performance reviews or whatever is not existing in your startup today. But finding those who want to be a part of something, I think there are many out there. That leads maybe the one thing I'll add is networking at places like this. It starts to build your talent pipeline. So I think you can think about this not only for your learning, customer relationships, probably fundraising, but also talent. Because I think some of your best hires will likely come from a conversation that started, that piqued their interest and their passion, and you get to see that come together, and you get to invite them to join you at a certain moment in time. So think about opportunities like this also as beginning your talent search, so that when you're ready for that hire, there's that one or two people you met and you had a great conversation around sustainability and product, and you give them a call.
I'll add a pro tip to that. If you're a founder or a leader in a startup, having a great professional network is everything, but that's intimidating and takes time. And the cheat that I discovered really early was be a speaker at events. It's the best because
She's
I
not wrong.
don't have to walk around meeting all of you because you already kind of have a sense of whether you want to know me or not, right? Like you'll come to me if you want to meet me. And so from day 10 practically, like within the first year, somebody told me that, and I rarely went to an event unless I was speaking, but I begged to speak. Like nobody wanted to hear from me in the beginning. Like I had to beg. I was in really bad rooms for a couple of years with like 2 people. But I just felt like I love efficiency. I'll do that.
Great tip.
Great point from the panel. And I think for our final question, what's one hiring mistake you made, and what would you do differently now? This is open to all.
I had an Achilles heel as a high. I always have an Achilles heel. Told you a little bit about my background. Because I kind of am a bootstraps person, I think anyone can do anything. So when you walk in the room to meet with me, I impute and like assume an awful lot about what you can do. But sometimes people don't want to do that. They don't want to be stretched to this or to that. So I found over time I needed to balance out my natural enthusiasm, which is fantastic once I actually hire you, because I am going to get you to see yourself here. Like if you're a person who wants to be there, I'm going to see it too, and I'm going to help you get there. But at hiring, that can be difficult. So the hack I had for me was to balance out my enthusiasm with usually my co-founder, who was way more cynical and savvy on that people front than I am. Like I just didn't pull the trigger on my own all that often. Even though I was CEO, I could have. I mean, you shouldn't anyway, probably for a lot of reasons, but I was solving my weakness when I was pulling other people in.
I love that. That is what we're doing. We're solving for our weaknesses, aren't we? Yeah. I've inherited a lot of teams. I have to say, my career has been, go in and work with the team that wants to get to the next level. And I didn't have a whole lot of hiring decisions for a lot of years. But when I do hire, what I've found to be really critical, because I do think that groups make better hiring decisions than individuals. That's what I wanted to share with you. I have blind spots, just like all of us. And I'm a super glass half full person. I love everybody. I love people. So I'm always going to be, you're going to be great. And I've brought a lot of people to the next level because of that enthusiasm. But when I hire, it's a very particular moment. I believe in hiring with groups. And in fact, to your point, you started off with diverse teams. I've become really involved in a practice for myself where my role as a hiring manager is to identify a diverse slate of candidates. I pre-screen, I identify a diverse slate, and I only give the hiring committee a diverse slate. And radical, I do not participate in the hiring committee. I've already made my decision that every single one of these candidates is a good candidate, and then I ask them to make the decision. And the reason I like groups is because they've made the decision. It tends to result in somebody maybe who is a non-traditional hire. And guess what happens psychologically to the team? The team makes sure that person succeeds.
Actually, you're surprising me. I would have thought a group would make a more traditional hire if, in that scenario where you're not the rudder anymore. You find they pick
Because they know what
the
they're
more risky.
Yeah, they know what they're
I'm
there to
shocked
do.
at that.
Yeah, I tell them that every single candidate in front of them is a viable candidate. Every single person is deserving of that job. And then I ask them to choose, because what happens to diversity candidates? They're not supported. They're questioned. So I have now 5 people that support that person's success. That's what I offer as what I think is something around hiring that I've learned from my own. Like, I don't want to make a decision alone anymore. I want to give that to the group. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I'll share my bias also in the hiring. So I started my career as a strategy consultant. So I think similar to what Jules was saying, your experience comes with a lot of bias. And I had a great conversation with one of my board members, not Liz Graham, who's in the room, who I love, who said, you know what you want more than a structured thinker, Kate? A structured doer. And so for me, that has also led me to make sure that, I have a foil in my hiring. I think I've got a good eye for, can this person really break down a problem, think smart, align the pieces, identify the levers, all that stuff. But when you say how fast can they get this done and deploy, I partner now with that. And so I think that's all of my, hiring mistakes tend to come back to that overweighting, one skill set versus the other. The other thing I want to know is we're talking about, hiring, but the other part, building teams with a focus on hiring, but the other part of building teams is the firing. So this, it's as the saying goes, but it's worth saying again, you want to fire faster than you think. It will always feel as though there's another opportunity around the corner if you're a people optimist. It will always feel like you can't afford to because you have to replace them, et cetera. But as soon as you have an inkling in your head, you are probably right. at the stage of company that you're in, and you want to move as quickly, as possible to make those hard decisions, because that's as important as building teams as the hiring piece.
If you ever meet an experienced leader and they're touting the fact that they've never needed to fire anyone because they're so amazing at hiring, run. Nobody's that amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm guilty of that. I always believe in like developing people, but I'm fully on board. It's just better to make the cut, and usually it's mutual anyways, because something doesn't feel right. And but I think what I will add to close out this round is actually I think a tool that is often not used during hiring. It's actually background checks. I also didn't do that in the early days. I think in the early days you get excited about someone, you do the offer, and you skip some steps and things that probably like a bigger company would do as part of their established process. I didn't do it myself in the early days. It didn't become a mistake, but it could have become a really, really big mistake for us. There was one candidate we were about to hire. Actually, everyone who interacted with that person, including our assessment center, with taking apart the machine and putting it back together, he was just stellar. It's just great candidate. We thought we hire. And then as part of my process, I always asked for 2 or 3 references. He shared those references, and I picked up the phone call. And I think it can be a little bit intimidating at the beginning to call up someone random and ask about this candidate when you have 0 rapport. But I think it's actually the fastest and easiest tool to just validate, is what the person is saying actually true? So what happened in our case, without going into any details, it turned out that candidate had lied to us across the entire process about selling his company. So I actually called the company that acquired his company. So there was some truth in that, but he had said the company is still going on. The company was shut down. They had no idea about the name. So very quickly, like, my red flags went on, and then I started going into the other references, and it was just all wrong. I started doing some more research, and that person had been in jail for identity fraud. So, so I had already written the offer. I didn't send it yet, and I just picked up that phone call. So I think that phone call took me 5 minutes and probably saved us a lot of time, or would have potentially put our team into risk. So I'm very glad I did it, and this is part of our process now going forward. So can I highly recommend it. It's really not that intimidating to call someone, because it's just a random person. Just be nice, frame it in a way that you want to hear about the strengths and the weaknesses, so that you can really put this person in the best spot in your company, and you might uncover some things that it's better to uncover earlier.
Can I add one great other question in the reference checks is, what should I know about this person to help them be successful in their next stage? Because then you have that little tidbit of development information ready to go when they join. I found it to be so helpful.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah.
Great. So definitely do your background checks. So, because that's important. But
I'm an optimist, but I think
great. I think that was great answers from the panel, and I think we're ready to open up the floor. 10 minutes for questions. Don't be shy.
Thank you. Great panel. I have an advisor who actually refuses to meet on board meetings, and it might partially be a social anxiety issue and so forth. And I don't know how you would handle it, but I'm trying to keep him on, and because he's very good, he's experienced in startups, and he's been very helpful as an advisor, but he won't meet with anyone other than myself in terms of board meetings. It's created a little bit of a lack of cohesion between me and my team, but I've been able to work around it. I'm just wondering how you would handle a similar situation.
Unless you're paying the guy, live with it. Like, he's advising you probably pro bono or for equity, and he gets to do it on his terms pretty much, probably. And if he's really good at the one-on-one, don't sweat it so much. I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, and I think I would just add this, because I think that's really right. And sometimes we don't actually sit down at the beginning of those relationships to ask, what is success? And in this, even if it's an advisor, anything, sometimes we skip those steps and we don't actually, it's your expectation to their expectation not meeting. So actually, if you maybe have these conversations at the beginning, you're going to be right-sizing the expectation for your mutual relationship. You may also decide that's not the right advisor because that's not the relationship you want to have. So sometimes having that explicit conversation is very helpful.
Perhaps just add one thing. The one thing that struck to me is you said he's really good and he's useful to you, right? So I think in general you have different advisors for different things. So perhaps that advisor is not the board member you want, but you can find someone else for that, right? So I think focus on what that person is good at, and if he or she is useful to you, keep the person, but then also know there are perhaps other gaps you need to fill with other people.
Oh, so many hands. We'll start off with you, sir.
We'd love to get the panel's perspective on what are your thoughts on the chief of staff, and when would you bring someone in, and how do you manage the trust in that relationship to let them manage the sort of day-to-day running the business while you take a longer-term view of the business?
I can start off with this one. So I hired a chief of staff about 1.5, 2 years ago. And I think it was a really good decision at that time of the company because we're still at a stage where it didn't make sense to get a lot of specialists in, like a CFO, a CMO, etc. So I could actually hire someone really smart, and I think the chief of staff role is very popular these days, and then have that person wear different hats and really like help me to take a lot of the projects off my plate while not dedicating a lot of resources into just one department. And then I always saw the chief of staff as a way to get someone on board, get exposed to different functions, to ideally grow into the lead of one of the functions. And within a 1 or 1.5 year timeline, and then I think that gives an opportunity to get a new chief of staff in place and then start filling those senior hires without taking too much risk early on.
It can be a really powerful role, and it's worth thinking, are you trying to staff yourself, in which case you want probably a more junior doer who's really good in, I don't know, Excel, PowerPoint, template, all the things you may need produced quickly and is running alongside you, versus you need almost a delegate or a surrogate who can either run point independently on strategic initiatives, who can run into cross-functional mess, who could take over certain departments at certain times, and just sort of knowing which one is most critical now will impact the hire, but have found it to be a very impactful role.
Excellent panel in the first place. And another question regarding advisors, if you don't mind. So let's say during the start of the process, like let's say it's a when we're trying to get some pre-seed, and if there's an investor, if there's an advisor like coming in and say like, I'm going to guide you and let me get some share in the like equity in a given a startup or like a business. So how we can negotiate, like what can we show them and negotiate with the equity, or like when we are trying to hire some employees, well, we don't have any funding in the first place, just to build the prototype and get the funding, you know. So at that point, let's say if people are super greedy and asking like, let's say 20% of share or like 30% of equity, but can we show them the TAM, or like the total addressable market? Like, let's say if it's a $6 billion business, let's say I'm trying for like building some better drone shows for like cheaper prices, which is a $6 billion market within a decade from now. So at that point, can we show them the total market value that we can achieve versus the equity that they are requesting for? And sometimes if they ask for like non-dilutive shares, that is like too much of a problem, right? So how to deal with that? How to negotiate with them with like 2% or like 1% equity or something like that?
I don't like what I'm hearing there. If I hear 20 to 30%, there's nobody who's worth that. And nobody on the planet who should be given that much equity in an early stage company for the role you're describing. I'm thinking of one man I know who's quite respected who does this. He calls himself a startup Sherpa in Silicon Valley with a really long track record. He helps fundraise, helps build the early team, and he helps give the company credibility. And he takes 5%. And so if somebody can show you that multiple companies have paid them 20% and have amazing outcomes, I stand to be corrected. But just on the sheer face of it, that sounds really crazy. I don't think you can go and, you can't give non-dilutive shares to them. You can't convince them on your future TAM that 2% is amazing. They have to be able to see that themselves if they're not aligned with your vision and your mission and your opportunity, then they're just opportunists. I really would be very careful about if anybody, if I'm understanding you correctly, I'd be very careful.
Yeah, that's what I felt in my gut in the first place. And when they always show like in the Shark Tank, like, you know, they go for like 20%, 30% equity, and that's where they take some examples and they say, but what you're saying is like, it's better to give like 5% at most.
You're
In the
talking like
initial.
Shark Tank numbers, which are crazy numbers. Like nobody should do those deals. Usually those deals fall apart behind the scenes. Like you do them for the TV and then you don't sign the contract. That's the level of deal that you're talking about.
And 5% is like the gold standard of advisor. I think most are closer to.
I didn't know that.
I think
Okay.
I would say closer to like 1% or less. If they're just doing very specific work, if they're coming in almost as a fractional, maybe it creeps up. But it sounds as though this is, I would, yeah, not the right benchmarking here. I would get closer to 1%.
Got it. Even for the advisor, right? Like 5% would be
Yeah,
max.
or have it like they got to earn into it. Otherwise, you need to know that they can deliver before you want to give away more of your company.
I paid half, 3/4 of a point to really serious advisors, and they had to vest, and they only had a 1-year contract because of what Pascal said earlier. Advisors come and go for, and not because they change, but because you change and what you need. So you don't want to be too locked into anybody too long on their side or your side.
Got it.
So
And
sharing my personal experience with advisors who seem greedy, I would usually stay away. I have seen everyone who has, the first thing they do is asking for stuff is a very, very red flag. I would focus the conversation on value added. And I would ask the advisor, so where do you think you can add most value? Let's write it down. Perhaps you can create milestones. Perhaps you can start with a very small advisory agreement on your highest priority of all those things where the person says they can add value. Perhaps you just put a 1/4% with vesting. You can put a cliff in place, so even if it doesn't work out within 6 months, there's nothing lost. But then let them prove themselves, right? They're not going to bring value for 20% in a short-term time frame. Let's focus on one. Let's add the next one in. Really build a relationship. I've seen the best success when advisors show value first, and then you grow with them. And at that point, when you see they add value, then it's changing your mindset of not giving up 0.5%, but hey, can I grow the pie by 10%? Because if you grow the pie with that person by 10%, like giving up 0.5% is a no-brainer, right? So I think sometimes we're also too greedy ourselves to attribute the value, but it is important that they prove the value first, and you can even do like vesting based on milestones. It's sometimes hard to quantify, but if you can quantify it, do that and have like very small option packages based on those milestones. The other thing I've seen some advisors ask for like cash payments. It's another red flag for me because a startup that is like resourceful, bootstrapped, why would you take out cash for an advisor? I think an advisor should be someone who's long-term incentivized and not just a short-term cash compensation.
Hi, my name is Krista, and I'm founding a food and beverage tech company. And my question is, how do you know once you've hired somebody if they're not working out or if they just need more resources and support from you as a employer?
So my guess is you don't have many more resources or support to give. So if they're not working out, they're not going to work out at this stage.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. I mean, if they're putting in a lot of effort and still not getting the job done, then they maybe aren't efficiently or confidently acting. You know, they're like sort of spinning out too much. And if they're not putting a lot of effort, then you don't want them anyway.
I think you want to sit down with the person at some point in this journey and actually address it, right? I feel like we're not succeeding here. This is what I'm missing. This is where I see you being. Like, tell me, like, what do you need to succeed, right? You need to have that conversation, I think, before letting someone go. And then ideally put a plan in place. Let's define some goals for the next 1, 2, 3 months, what we want to achieve, and let me know what the resources are you need, and then you commit to those resources, and you check in again in 4 weeks. And if you see it's not hit, then I think you have to make the cut. But at least it was an open conversation. Both sides know. There's no surprise. I think because I think it's also important. It's still there is a human side. So you don't just want to fire people, but perhaps there's another job that's better for that person, and then you can go like splits in good terms.
The one little window of exception I have for that is I always had a lot of tolerance for when a young or new employee made just human error, made mistakes. If they're working hard and they weren't a sloppy person and it wasn't a judgment thing, like just crazy judgment, I usually assumed the company was letting them down. Like we just hadn't informed them of how to do something, or we were asking them to do things that were just kind of a stretch. So, and as long as they surface their own mistakes, the minute a new employee surfaced a mistake that they made, I wanted to have a party. I was so happy that that person had the confidence and the sense of responsibility to own their mistake. I knew they'd never make it again. Other people wouldn't make it if it was known. So I would separate mistakes versus like output or quality. Mistakes are their own kind of possible, even great opportunity to develop that person and the company's understanding of the mutual relationship between the company and an employee and the risk taking that's expected, which will lead to mistakes.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to add, if I can, is that there are some really useful frameworks in looking holistically at the person and making sure you're setting the right conditions at the start. So the conference board has something that I've used for many years, that I sit down with people and make sure they understand the strategy, make sure we understand what the results are, ensure that they are upfront, saying some people do need some skilling up sometimes to do things, and that's not a weakness. That's something we can support. And then really clear about the relationships they need to be making to be successful, because it's not just about you, right? Their success to deliver those results is relationships with other people. Super simple framework, great way to have a conversation. And I would say most people in this room are in really small organizations. There should be nothing keeping you from talking to your people every 2 weeks to check in with that framework as the basis of your conversation.
Wow, great panel. Unfortunately, folks, we are out of time. I know you guys love the panelists so much, but definitely connect with them on LinkedIn or maybe after this session to get some of your questions answered. But thank you guys so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
So before we officially leave, just a couple reminders. We have our ecosystem fair that's going to be happening here at Suffolk at 6:30. So there's going to be a ton of organizations and showcasing just some resources, including the startup community, government organizations, accelerators, and networking. So be sure to come here for that. The next session in this room is From Receipts to Rewards, Data Loyalty, and the Future. So if you're here virtually, just stay in the room. If not, just make sure to check in which one you're looking at going to next. And then lastly, there's a community bulletin board on the first floor, so check that out to see what's happening across here in the startup scene. But thank you guys all for coming, and have a great day. It's crazy, huh? Okay. I'm gonna shift everybody, take that half step to the left.